Hello. Children should be able to easily access mental health support in school before they reach crisis point, says community organisation Citizens UK. A meeting is taking place in Brighton tonight to try to secure funding for more mental health counsellors in schools. Waiting lists for those suffering severe mental health problems are long and growing, and teachers and pupils say reaching young people early will end up saving money and help children with their education. Sarah Smith reports.
It was coping with friends' problems which put Fee's mental health under pressure. During the pandemic, the teenager was a sympathetic ear to those struggling, but the responsibility became too much.
Once you're in that situation, you sort of feel like you're the only one that can help, and so I was just constantly trying to help my friends, and yeah.
So did you feel a sort of pressure and responsibility for them?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously it's not their fault, but I felt in certain instances I was the only one that was told, and so I felt like, oh, if that person has told me something, it's my responsibility to do something about it.
At Varndean School, they hire in a counsellor 3 days a week, but it's not enough. Teachers try to help, but they're needed in the classroom.
We're really fortunate here that we place a lot of our time on wellbeing and support for students, but there's only so much that our teachers and support staff can give. They're not medical professionals. We also know that there's a CAMS waiting list and some students are waiting for really specialised treatment, but there is that group of students in the middle that we feel are missing out.
CAMS is the Children's Mental Health Service, but there are tens of thousands of young people on the waiting list in Kent, Sussex and Surrey.
The longer the delay in being able to access treatment, the more complicated and the bigger the problem becomes, and that means that the recovery can take a lot longer and it can be much more expensive.
At a meeting this evening here at Varndean School, the leader of the council and the NHS will hear a plea for a £2 million investment in counsellors to help children across the city's schools before they reach crisis point.
The campaign is organised by Brighton Hove Citizens, a network of schools, colleges, faith and community groups. It incorporates around 10% of the city's population.
The way we see this investment is, as such, it's an investment. We know from research that for every pound invested in school-based counselling, £8 is saved for the system.
The council and the NHS say they'll make their decision after the meeting. Sarah Smith, BBC South East Today, Brighton.
Well, we're joined now by Joanna Holmes. She's from the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, and she is attending this meeting tonight at Varndean School. She joins us live. Thank you so much for joining us, Joanna. How much do you think it would benefit pupils from having access to a counsellor in school? We know that Scotland and Wales already have this as a matter of course. Schools in the US often have it. Why don't we have it here, and should we?
Absolutely. So it would benefit children and young people tremendously. They'd have somewhere in school where they could go to explore the issues and the problems and the challenges that they're facing. And the earlier they have those conversations with trained counsellors who are trained mental health professionals, the better. So we at BACP, we call for a counsellor in every school, and that money should be ring-fenced by the government, like you've already mentioned, in the other nations across the UK, so that schools can spend money just on children and young people's mental health, and it's not in competition with all the other cuts and stresses and strains that they have on the school budget.
What do you think is behind this big increase in children who need to access mental health services, do you think?
I think children and young people have always experienced mental distress, and I think people are talking about it more. There's obviously some young people whose mental health has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but there was a problem around services and having enough services to meet children's needs before the pandemic. I think back then it was 1 in 9 children and young people were suffering with mental health. Now it's 1 in 6. At the end of this month there's going to be new NHS data set results which could change. It could be even more young people, it could be 1 in 5. We know that in classrooms, say of about 30, at least 3 children will be experiencing poor mental health, and other people will be suffering from separation, divorce, problems at home. So there's lots of pressure on children and young people. What causes it? I think just the stresses of life and not knowing what to do with the emotions that they're feeling. They're not necessarily mental disorders, it's low mood, it's anxiety, it's worry, and a lot of that is around relationships, families, you know, things that life throws at them.
Indeed, and probably social media proliferation doesn't help either, does it, Joanna? But do you think there's a danger, there is some research to support the theory that we're pathologising anxiety more now? We're turning anxiety into a problem. Do you think that's sort of self-perpetuating a bit? Should we be changing our attitudes to it?
I don't know, I think the stigma has gone around mental health and more people are talking about mental health. I think the danger of pathologising is it makes somebody a problem as opposed to seeing the person. And I think, you know, what you can have through counselling is you bring an issue to the counsellor, to the counselling room, and you work out the best way that you can manage that successfully, throughout life really. And we know that the impact of counselling, you know, there's been one study by Cambridge and Exeter University that said the impact of counselling 2 years later can still improve your mental health. So counselling is a really good on-the-spot resource to have in schools that can take the strain off of teachers and support workers in school.
Joanna Holmes, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you. And for more information on organisations that can advise on mental health issues, access the BBC's Action Line at bbc.co.uk/Action Line.